I'm a fan. And one of the reasons why I thought, let me just reach out for you, apart from the fact we were meant to do a podcast together, that we will still do I don't know when, I don't know in what guise, but it will come. But this has kind of been my priority. Yeah. It's been my priority.
I guess for my part, the reason I bang on about class all the time, I actually almost got in trouble at it because of talking about it, because I was talking about it in the paper at work, and they're like, well, it's not really, I'm like, well, it's really important to me. So for my background, I grew up in the whitest and most middle class town ever, Harrogate in North Yorkshire, but I grew up in a council house. I first lived in a homeless hostel when I was 1 year old. I was homeless again when I was 16 years old. I've begged on the streets to be able to afford to eat. So kind of that was challenging. I was signed off sick with mental health issues for a really long time, on benefits. So that, kind of compounded that poverty aspect of my upbringing. And I guess I kind of always had my eye on how I can help people, because my last job before I had this one, I was working at Digital Catapult in London, and it was an amazing experience. I was very lucky to get that, because Caroline Gorski, who we will be doing the podcast with, essentially met me and gave me the opportunity to work there. But I walked into this building where everybody, had worked for the Guardian and the BBC, and they were Oxford educated private school kids, and I had such bad imposter syndrome when I got there, because I was like, how can I hang out with these people and add stuff to meetings? And actually, the thing that I came to understand was my perspective was actually really valuable, because they didn't have any kind of comprehension of what it's like. And I think we have a massive problem right now where the upper echelons of society are just a whole bunch of people that all look the same and talk the same and act the same and come from similar backgrounds. And that's just not good enough, right? I guess one thing that I'm going to say now, and I've already had a conversation about this earlier today, because it makes me feel like I look like a bit of a psychopath. But the thing that really kind of opened my eyes to my responsibilities when it comes to racism was Grenfell, because I remember waking up in the morning and kind of reading the news and watching all the footage, and just the absolute, nothing has ever impacted me like that, like the absolute horror. But with a bit of hindsight and a bit of perspective, I have come to see that the reason that I had that abject horror was an element of, well, that could have been me. I grew up in social housing. I grew up in this poor from a poor background. And as we learned more about the people that died in that horrible fire, and we saw a proliferation of black and brown faces and of Muslim faces, and it just something got to me and just made me go, I do not do it enough. I do not read enough. I do not engage with this enough, because that little voice that could have been me was that thing that I needed to kind of boot me through the doors. Obviously, like, I have empathy. I guess I was sitting in that place where a lot of white people sit, which is, well, I'm not racist. I don't say racist things. And until I had to face up to something that horrific, I guess I thought that was enough. And it's obviously not. I've written a big old extended blog post yesterday. I published it, where I've been talking about kind of the responsibilities of white people. But how do we get people through that empathy door that I had to go through? And in a horrible way. I don't know.
I know, and it's such a difficult one, because I'm asked it from different contexts, but it's the same point. And the root cause of the point is, I've got black people saying to me, like, Shereen, it's great that you're speaking out and you're being so, like, unfiltered. Do you know what I mean? Like, as much as people want to just go, like, oh God, what's she going to lay bare to? But what they're saying is, that's great that you're doing that, but you on your own cannot influence just because of your force of will. Okay, and what they're saying is, how do we get white people to care like you care, or to care like some other people in very different parts, you know, so because you've got people speaking about it and have been speaking about it for years and whatever else it is. But what they're saying is how, like, universally, not, you know, the exceptions, not the few people that we can, you know, point to, but as a almost like as a movement, you know. So in the same way that I guess the protests have brought people out into the streets all over the world, you know, around Black Lives Matter. The danger with that is that the second you're not protesting out on the streets is, well, then life goes back to normal. And to some extent, we need that same energy that comes with those who did protest and those that have said this is not good enough, and who, to your point, they got to the place of empathy, and in terms of, and that thing of empathy is recognizing that, do you know what, like, even though this doesn't concern me, like, I can carry on living my life with the blinkers on. That's not how I want to live my life, because I can't unknow that there, you know, there are people that are living this life, but who people that I interact with or could interact with on a day-to-day basis. And I think it's really difficult because, like, I don't have an answer. It's to some extent, why did some people care about Grenfell and some people didn't? Like, why do some people care, you know, about all the other atrocities that are going on in the world, and some people don't, you know, and some people are quite happy to just, you know, donate a little bit of money for a charity. And that's about the extent of their involvement, and that's human beings. So that's not a, you know, not criticizing. That's,
I think this is one of the things that I've got to in my head is empathy has an outer limit. If we spent all of our days caring about everything that was happening in the world, you know, we would just be a mess, right? Yeah. We would just be wrecked. We'd just be going, oh my God, the Amazon's like burning down, and the Brazilian president like doesn't care. In fact, he's actively encouraging it. Like, there are tragedies, huge and tiny, every day, all over the world, and you can't care about them all because, you know, you just wring yourself out to nothingness. But, and I guess we've seen, actually, I've had so many conversations over the past few weeks, and there's been like a whole bunch of people who are going, well, like, but we're not America, and, you know, we're not like kneeling on people in the street, and that's
we don't do that. So why are they all getting so excited about it all? Why is it such a big deal?
And I think on the counterpoint, we also have, you know, the horrible events that happened in London, where we have like white working class racists having a fascist rally on the street, and to a lot of people that is the face of the white working class. Like, well, they don't care about this stuff, they're all racist, they're all chanting football stuff and doing Nazi salutes by the statue of Hitler. And like, yeah, that's really awful. But when it comes to middle class racism, I tell you what, it might not be people doing that stuff in the street, but it's much more effective at, you know, scaring people and keeping them down. And we don't talk about that. The face of racism in this country is the football hooligan. But that's not how it actually is, right?
To some extent, if that was the extent of racism in this country, there would be a lot of us that would be like, do you know what, we cope. Do you know what I mean? We, you know,
just let them get on with it, like whatever.
Just, do you know what I mean? Put them in a pen, you know, just let them get on with it.
Some beers and let them go.
Yeah, just when they sober up, throw some water on them and they'll be fine. You know, that's the thing. And I think it's your point about the middle class bit, and that's the bit where because I'm coming at this from a business angle, because I'm all about the experiences of Black people in the world of work, right? Not the societal stuff, because that makes it this, and I'm trying to, you know, bring it down to stuff that can work. The reality is that we are blocked. Doors are closed. Some closed because people didn't even know they were closed. It's a bit like, oh, I didn't realize I had to open the door. Some because people have slammed the door, and others because they have wedged the door closed. Like, you are not getting in here, or if we do allow you in here through the goodness of our, you know, there we go. That's the word. I was looking for the word benevolence. It's a bit like, you know, we have made an exception for you. You know, we don't normally have your type in here, but, you know, we're going to, you know, this is how the sign of the times, you know, and genuinely in their minds, that's how they talk. And that's in their minds how they believe. Because, and you know, that's only the case because then when they've come in, they've shut the door for everybody else, because it's like, don't need any more people.
I'm gonna be political, because I always am, but Priti Patel, when she talks about not allowing people to come over from different countries, when she is the child of immigrants who came over from a different country, it's exactly that. We have a problem where just shutting the door behind you. What is that?
Yeah. Yeah. What is that?
When it comes to the workplace, I guess it's about having protest energy in the workplace.
Oh, yes. Can I quote that? Yes. I love quoting people that come with. Oh, love that. Yes, keep that same protest energy, but in the workplace, because it's needed. Because I think it's just like anything in business. From when it's seen that there's no attention and there's no impetus, then the board will carry on doing what the board always does, which is go back to the agenda items. Do you know what I mean? And just and carry on. So you kind of get into that whole business as usual thing, rather than pushing. But also the other bit, and this is the bit I wanted to mention, because obviously I did read your article. Of course I did, and commented. But it's also recognizing that when you are, and this is actually has applications outside of this, but when you are a one voice who is pushing for change, who's pushing for equality, pushing through for difference, and you're meeting that wall, you've experienced it, I've experienced, when you're meeting this wall of people who just don't understand, don't want to understand, and by the subject of what you're talking about, they feel attacked. So because they feel attacked and they're in a position of power, they use that to squash your voice, in the hope that will teach Jem, because she's never going to raise it again, because she knows that that's how we're going to act. Do you know what I mean? Or they think to themselves, or they think, we'll tell Shereen that, and then she'll just put up with it. Clearly, none of the businesses that I've worked for ever thought in a month of Sundays that I would be as vocal as I would be, and now probably sitting thinking, shit, what is she going to say about,
Oh, she's got the receipts. She's going to bring them.
She's going to bring the receipts, everybody.
So one of the things that I was talking about, and I didn't put in the article, I guess I've got another article to write, was talking about the support idea of grief. So I don't know if you've ever seen, like, there's a diagram you get, and in the middle is the person that is most impacted by the death or whatever it is, and then round that there is the immediate family, and then friends, and kind of so on and so on. And the idea is that people can grieve outwards, and that support has to come inwards. And this is kind of some of my thinking around how we support people, because essentially, if the people that are most impacted are in the middle of this circle and they are grieving and they are struggling, it is the responsibility of those on the outside of the circle to offer that support in. So, just, I guess, your best friend, offers you support, and then your best friend needs support, because offering that support is also work. But that needs to be thought of, and that's why I wrote the article, because I'm just trying to kind of pass and get to the point that it's not the responsibility of my Black colleagues to perform their anger and their grief for the exec or for the board or for anybody, so that people suddenly start going, oh, that's obviously really impacting you. But by the same token, I was on the call with my boss earlier, Liz, who's a Black woman, and she was talking about how she does feel that she has a responsibility. I hope she doesn't mind me saying this.
It's too late now.
I hope she, sorry, Liz, I'm sure it'll be fine. But how she feels like she has to take that responsibility, because there are people contacting her going, are you okay? How are you feeling about this? And she's their only Black friend. So she has taken the responsibility to go, now is the time. Like, I am exhausted. I am spent. I am crying all the time. You need to hear this, because if you don't hear this from me, then maybe you're not going to hear it. You're not going to have that level of empathy. And you've offered that support. Now you have to take the grief, and hopefully that will make you act.
Yeah, and that's that's exactly it. And I think that you use the analogy of grief. Because it is that my mind is so simplistic. But I keep saying to people, I'm like, look, when you have a department in your business that needs support or needs extra resource because of X, Y, and Z, you don't take 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks pontificating on what you're going to do to go and sort that. You just dive in Do you know what I mean? You dive in, you go and do whatever it is that you go and do. You tell people, everyone else, don't bother, just carry on with what you're doing because we're just going to focus here. And you get on with it.
Mm-hmm.
So you get on, and whatever that support looks like. If you're, a business and you're coming up with a new product or a new service, or your customers are not happy, you bring those customers into the heart of what you do in a heartbeat. You do voice of the customer, you do forums, you do this, you do listening, you engage in social listening, you bring all the people, you bring, and you do all of that stuff. So in this context, I always say to businesses, your black colleagues, your black employees, they are the equivalent. And yet we're still spending all of this time trying to increase our level of awareness and try. It's almost like, I feel like some people are like trying to gird their loins almost. It's almost like, just got to push through it. I've just got to push. I will just give it in my own time. Oh God, do I have to? And so, you see all of this stuff and you're a bit like, so while you're doing that, because you're pushing past yourself, we should just sit here and wait.
It's a privilege. It's a privilege to feel uncomfortable instead of fucking fear. And that is a thing that I think loads of white people don't get. Like I've been stressing. I've been absolutely putting my energy into it. I've been writing poetry about it. I've been doing all of this stuff, and then I'm doing this call. And you know what? After this call, I'm going to put it down for a couple of days, and that is a privilege. And I'm very aware of the fact that I get to do that because I don't have to live this. Don't get me wrong. I'm living my own stuff. I'm dealing with all this poverty trauma and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
And that doesn't go away. But yeah, I get really, really frustrated where I see, white people just go, well, I feel uncomfortable, or I don't want to be called out, or like,
I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to say the wrong thing. What's going
to happen if you say the wrong thing? Is something actually terrible going to happen to you, or are you just going to feel a bit crap and then be better? Like,
no, do you know what I saw? Do you know what somebody did a post? I always like people on LinkedIn that like what I call write like proper stuff, not just like trying to go for the whole do you agree? Say yes. Yeah, I agree. All of that bullshit. And somebody actually said that I think it's a guy in America, and he said that when white people feel like that, right, so that it's all about, and he said what they're afraid of is losing social capital. Do you know what I mean? I don't even know. I must remember who it was. I don't even know if I interacted. I thought, oh my God, I never thought about it like that. Because they're so conscious that if, particularly, it goes back to this whole point about if you're the only voice that speaks up a little bit, and you're seeing none of your peers, none of your colleagues, none of your directors, all the people that you hold alongside, and they're not saying anything, it's like they do it in psychology and sociology, right? It's this whole thing about you don't want to be the one to put your head above the parapet, because by you doing that, potentially you will not be accepted back into this group that you've always been comfortable and want to be accepted within. Mm-hmm. And then that manifests itself particularly online when you see the same people that have got lots of things to say about the pandemic, lots of things to say about you name it. They've got something, they're the first to do. And then in this, there's just nothing. Or they've waited to see which way the tide is turning, and then they thought, shit, let me. People are posting black squares, and you're like, that was last week.
But by the same token, I've had some really interesting conversations this week around virtue signaling. So this started because somebody I know was talking about virtue signaling, and they used this comparison. I think he used it in this blog where I was talking like, well, is it better to buy a homeless person a sandwich, or is it better to film yourself buying a homeless person a sandwich? And I was like,
yes,
just buy that, doesn't matter, that's fine. But that's about social capital, right? It's all about social capital. But then we kind of got onto this, well, no, I'm not really talking about that. It was just a really poor analogy. What I'm actually talking about is racism, where people are posting black squares. Are they just doing it because it's part of a movement? I called some people out on the black squares things. I'm going to put my hands up now and said, I put, woke up in the morning, saw the black squares, was like, yes, I'm going to post a black square. And then I took it down because I just thought, hang on a minute. That's just, what am I doing there? What am I doing except all this other stuff? And then there was all the stuff going, you post in a black square, you're actually blocking out this essential information.
Yeah, but then you know what? Everyone's going to pull together everything. We'll just sit and do nothing. But yes, no, you're absolutely right.
So I posted a meme of ContraPoints, who is just pro tip everybody, the greatest trans YouTuber. And there was this thing, just like her, as dressed all in white, going, "I've done it. I've solved racism." And like called out people, got into some arguments, but one of my friends messaged me and was like, "You really made me think about that." And I wasn't doing enough, was I? I wasn't reading, wasn't donating, wasn't doing all this other stuff. So yeah, but that's the protest energy. That's the protest energy you need to bring to work. You need to bring it to your family. You need to bring it to, to social media. Just go, are you doing enough?
Yeah.
Could you be doing more? Is that an okay thing to say? Did you mean that like that? I mean, I don't know. There's ways and means of doing it. I could be really harsh. I could be like, I think I've been calling people that complain about statues being pulled down statue nonsense, and maybe that isn't the way to get them on.
Well, no, but listen, you've been saying the same thing I did, because this whole thing about, because people are like, Shereen, are you going to do a video on statues? I'm like, no, I'm not going to do a fucking video on statues, because it's not important. Like, look, if I thought that pulling down statues, and I'm not saying for a second they probably shouldn't have been there in the first place. They should be in museums. That's not about that. Before somebody says, somebody's going to say to me, Shereen, how can you say that when you know their history? No, it's not about that. What I'm saying is that when people jump on this, it's a bit like, I don't know if you saw this, but clearly everyone was bored and went, right, let me just see what else I can do. Oh, look, Kellogg's have been using a monkey for Coco-Pops.
What?
Have you not seen this? Oh,
no.
Right. So let me school you on this. Right. So this was a couple of days ago. So Kellogg's are now were raked through the coals because they had a monkey for Coco-Pops, but for Rice Krispies it was 3. They're like grown men but babies. I don't know.
They're like little gnomes or something.
Little gnomes or whatever. So this is whole thing about Coco-Pops because it's brown and it's the monkey, and the monkey swinging in the jungle and whatever else it is, and then Rice Krispies, whatever. So anyway, somebody. I don't even, dare I say, I actually think it might have been an MP.
Of course it was. And guess which party? Let's think.
I don't even know. I actually think she might have been a black MP as well, which just...
What?
Oh, don't. Let's not get started on that one. However, and I just wanted to go like, people, focus.
Yeah, well, this is the thing.
I'm not saying it's not important. I'm not saying that they shouldn't have done it. I'm not saying it's not wrong. But what I'm saying is when you make the argument,
the energy of the thing that you need to have the energy on right now.
I
wrote a poem about it. The snuff film one I wrote. Where they're turning this anger about like genuine and absolutely righteous anger into they're talking about Fawlty Towers. Like, yes, that is a tiny piece of some of the stuff that we need to solve. But they are. And actually, I guess this kind of comes back to the class issue, because what they're doing is they're turning a righteous anger into something that can be passed down by the media and start to make people think that it's just a stupid thing instead
Correct.
Of vital.
Oh, Jem, that's my point, because what happens is, and there are some, some people who are calling some of this stuff out are what I would like to believe. Some are well-meaning white people who go, this is not on. I've been looking at this, at some point, Uncle Ben's, they paid Uncle Ben like $50 or something to use his face, and the poor man has never received all of it. Somebody will go for them in a minute. However, you're absolutely right, because what you end up doing is the ridiculousness of it in terms of the change it will affect. It's not great. That's not the point. But you then allow people to say, it's the snowflake generation, or what are they going to come for next? Because, our furniture
the pyramids.
The pyramids
next.
Pyramids. What's safe? Is it my furniture that, has been chopped down from trees in Amazon forest? Is that what they could, and then, you know what I mean? And then you just think, and then you go, that's what we do. And whether some people
no, do not take responsibility. It's the media. It is the media. We are saying these things. They are just, I don't know if it's deliberate. I don't know if it's well-meaning white people that are just trying to break it down into the little bits that it needs to be broken down to. But ultimately, structural inequality, structural racism is the thing that we're trying to tackle here. Whether this is from a class issue, whether we're talking about, because Grenfell happened because of austerity. There was enough money in that council to have the swankiest thing, but they wanted to cover up that building because they thought it was an eyesore in a posh bit of London, and they spent as little money as they could to fix it, and like 72 people died because of that. And you know, that's the structural stuff that we actually care about. It's the lack of just thought and meaning and thinking that people's lives, whether they are a nurse or whether they are a granny that likes dancing or whether they're the prime minister, like all of those lives are equally important. And I just don't get why people don't understand that.
Yeah. And so therefore, what did somebody, like, I don't know who's that, like, there's a quote, it says, you know, until we're all free, none of us are free, right? And it's this whole idea of until we can all be afforded some semblance of equality. And that's what I keep saying to people, like, you know, don't get distracted by how Black Lives Matter has been hyped into things that, to your point, you know, go from the ridiculous to the sublime in terms of how it, you know, what it's then people have been doing.
Yeah,
it's the impact. Because actually what the whole purpose is that, you know, we can no longer be treated as second-class citizens. Black people can no longer be treated as second-class citizens, whether they're from a school, from an education, from, you know, police brutality, from, you know, employment, from business. But also, I've been saying to people, listen, don't get it twisted. Like, the corridors of power do not have Black people in the corridors of power. So even by definition of us talking about it, you know, in an ideal world, you know, we would be running the world, Jem, people like me and you, and everybody would be like, oh my God,
never a dictatorship.
Yeah, do you know, no, we'd just be like, do what you want, everybody, do what you want. But it's and that's the harsh truth, in that, you know, as much as I would love to be able to sit here and say, through sheer force of will, right, and I'll just keep talking and keep, you know, making lots of phone calls behind the scenes and trying to, you know, find all these different ways to really put a spotlight on this. Black people, we don't have the power. We've never had the power, because structurally we have never had the power.
It's the responsibility of people like me who have more privilege to start going, right, well, we need to do something about this. We need to raise up Black voices. We need to, there's so much that we can be doing that just isn't quite seeping through. I genuinely hope that this Black Lives Matter movement, and I know this isn't even the first time we've been protesting.
No, Jesus.
I can't breathe, right? Yeah. But there's a momentum. And if maybe it's just that, you know, my work has been good. We've had like proper D&I ideathons and really raised up people's voices, and it's been good, but that's not happening everywhere, right? So how can we do it? What can we do to power? How do we speak truth to power, and that power then suddenly start going, all right, I get that. I'm not sure. I guess
I think that's where it's the voices of many. Yes. Consistently, that's the only way that, you know, and then if that doesn't work, then unfortunately what people will start doing, they will start voting with their feet, and they'll go, I'm not going to buy from you, I'm not going to join your business. You know, there are a lot of businesses, particularly here in the UK, who let's be honest, they've got to benefit from the Black culture, the Black you know, the Black and brown pounds, that, you know, all of
stuff from Lloyd's and from Green King, was it, where, you know,
one of my previous employers,
get them called out. But like, exactly, so that, you know, these people essentially got £500,000 because they own slaves, and that money they got comes back to class, because it was the middle class rich people that owned these slaves, and they then benefited from that, and the working class and the Blacks who like never got anything out of that were still kept down, because these companies have all the money and just have all the power, and we have nothing. We have nothing except an internet connection and the ability to rant.
Ability to rant, which let's not underestimate, because that has power too. Listen, they got paid that. The founder of Green King got paid that because he was upset that they abolished slavery. So they were like, so can you imagine, like, you've got to laugh, because if you don't laugh, you just think to yourself, Jesus, well, this is crazy. But can you imagine, like, trafficking individuals and keeping people in chains and taking them from their countries and doing whatever? And because the law changed, and you're not happy that the law changed, we're going to pay you to just feel a bit better about the world.
Not the people in chains though, because
No,
it's fine, right?
People in chains, as time goes on, we're expected to forget about it, because let's leave the past in the past, you know. But if you leave the past in the past, what happens is we still stay where we are, but they still stay where they are. That's why they don't. That's why nobody really, because this is not new news. The stuff about Green King, the stuff about Lloyd's of London, there are other financial institutions that have benefited from this. It's not new news, but it's all been buried. It's been buried. It doesn't get the light of day because it's a bit like, oh, you know, you black people, you're always going on about slavery, aren't you?
And yeah, I can't with the world.